hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are, whatever you're up to. My name is Caroline Cabe, and I'm your host for Women of the West, a podcast exploring the lives of cowgirls, rodeo athletes, artists, and more unsung female heroes of the West. We'll be hearing from a wonderful lineup of inspirational women who are opening up about what it's like to be a woman in the Western industry. First up, we'll be talking with iconic rodeo contractor and owner of the historic Vold Rodeo Company, Kirsten Vold. Kirsten is a legacy through and through. You may have heard of her father, Harry Vold, aka the Duke of the Chutes, a legendary stock contractor known for his one-of-a-kind bucking horses and one-of-a-kind spirit. At just 25 years old, Kirsten took over her father's company and became responsible for one of rodeo's top stock contracting businesses. Kirsten opened up about growing up on the rodeo circuit, taking on such a large role at such a young age, and how she manages the pressure of an ever-evolving industry. Please enjoy our very first episode of Women of the West.
Just looking, I think I grabbed the rain hat on accident. I didn't mean to, but looking at this angle, I'm like, wow, how did I manage to do that? It was a rush job to.
Is that a Stetson resistol?
This is a resistol. Yeah, this is a resistol, and I meant to grab my new hat, and by the looks of the shape of it, I did not do that.
Okay, it shows the hard work you do every day.
There you go.
I'll use like an AI tool to make it straight or something. And
you can do that. That would be awesome. I would be very appreciative about that.
You're like a resistol person, right? Like that's your hat type?
Yeah, that's what I always wear. Black. I always black.
Perfect.
I am a resistol endorsee, but the big thing is I like the product, and I've never worn anything but black hats. When I was a kid, I always had to wear colored hats. And so I think when I got old enough, bought my first black hat. I decided never to go anything else because I know what it's like to have to wear a pink hat or a red hat.
Why'd you have to wear
all of it?
Like part of the rodeo thing that you had to do, or?
Yeah, when I was a kid, younger, I had to carry a flag in the openings with my mom and stuff like that. And just even younger than that, just when I was dressed up, following my dad in the Grand Entry when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, I'd follow along behind him on my horse. And so, back then they wanted to dress you, what they thought was cute was like a red pair of pants and a red hat, or a pink pair of pants and a pink hat. And I wanted a black hat, but they never bought me a black hat. They always bought me a colored hat. So once I got old enough to get away from the colored hats, I haven't done anything but black.
Going full serious. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you ever go back to that? Like if down the future, would you ever come back and do a full pink hat, pink outfit? Or
gosh, I hope not. I would be, I don't know how much alcohol that would take, but I would think it would take quite a bit.
Okay. So if I see that, I'll know something.
You'll know it was a great party and you should have been there.
So you've got a busy rodeo season ahead of you. What's going on for the next couple of weeks? Are you going to the American or?
No, my season doesn't really start. I got a college rodeo in Prescott, Arizona, at the end of this month, we'll leave. And that's the first weekend in May. And that's a long ways to go to a college rodeo. But my boss at the College National Finals and my boss at the Prescott Frontier Days Rodeo is putting it on. And so he called and asked me. It was the first year that they put on a college rodeo, and he asked me to come. And so I have a hard time ever telling him no. And honestly, it's good. It's good for the bucking horses because you can use some younger, not as seasoned horses for an event like that. And the way you season them is by putting some miles on them. They get unloaded, going to new bucking in different arenas and stuff like that. And it's the younger college kids are good. It's a good matchup that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good for all of us. It's a good situation, but it's a long drive to go over there twice in 1 year. We'll go over there the 1st of May, and then I'll go back again over the end of June whenever we go back for the 4th of July rodeo.
That's a lot. It is, yeah. And there is a lot. I feel like there's a lot of charm to college rodeos too, because it's like you get to see kind of the future of what rodeo is going to look like.
It is. I agree. I've been honored enough to do the College National Finals for I don't even know how many years Dad had it before.
Yeah.
And you do. You get to see all the up and coming stars, and you get to see a lot of these kids I don't get to see again after college rodeo. So yeah, it's I enjoy it. It's a great experience to be around them. They're not tarnished and jaded yet sometimes.
Yeah. Not quite yet. I know it's hard to pick favorites, but do you have a rodeo that you most look forward to each year?
Yeah, I mean, probably my hometown rodeo. When we do the Colorado State Fair right here, I'm chairman of the rodeo committee, and so I do have great rodeos all over and great friends, and I'm very grateful for all those rodeos. But anytime that you can put on a rodeo and do what you do, and and be able to go to sleep in your own bed that night. Yeah,
Makes a difference.
that's a pretty cool thing. I have my trailer here, and I sometimes staying at the fairgrounds and stuff, but I'm 20 miles away, 25 miles away probably. So I can leave the fair rodeo grounds and be in my house in 30 minutes. And that's a luxury I don't have any other time of the year. So I do usually exercise it a few nights during the
Oh
rodeo.
man, sleeping in your own bed after like a night,
It is
it's like,
just to stretch out and have space. I have the luxury of having a great trailer that I take, along through the rodeos and everything, but it's not super roomy.
yeah,
So just that area, just that idea of being able to just, kick your legs up on the coffee table, watch your big screen TV, just those things that you get used to not doing whenever you have your trailer. So
yeah.
yeah,
Did you have
no,
a rodeo growing up, like when you were kind of traveling with your dad?
Probably when I was growing up, Cheyenne was probably my favorite as a kid, just because all the Cowboys kids, back when I was a kid, the Cowboys didn't really bring their families like they do now. It was, it's still expensive, but it's just kind of a different era. Families just didn't travel with their fathers like they do now, or in their moms and stuff like that and stuff. So, but in the summertime, they did, more obviously. And then, Cheyenne was always one that people just brought their kids. So there was just more kids for me to play with. So that's why Cheyenne was probably always my favorite. And we would have lemonade stands and boot
Oh,
shining booths. And, I mean, there was the kids that would come there every year with their families. And so those were sometimes you usually only saw them once a year.
yeah.
But yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed that. And that'll always have special memories for me
Yeah.
growing up.
That's awesome. And I mean, we've kind of touched on it, but you've got rodeo in your blood. You grew up with the legendary Harry Vold and as a father, and you were on the road all the time. So you were homeschooled during that time, right?
I was homeschooled all the way until ninth grade.
Wow.
So until I went to high school, and that was by choice. I wanted to go to public school by the time I got to high school. And so I talked my parents into let me do that. And I'll never regret it. I think it really helped me mainstream me get used to college life. I think it would have been tough to go from being homeschooled my entire and then go to college where I'd never been around people that was my own age.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier. I encourage people all the time. Homeschooling is so mainstream now
Hmm.
that I have several friends that homeschool their kids. But I always tell them, you do miss a lot. I'm not saying I went without, but if I would have ever had kids, I would not have homeschooled them because I just think public school gives you a lot of experiences you can't replicate in any other setting. So I enjoyed it. My 4 years of high school at public school was a very fun time for me.
Good. What was for homeschooling and kind of being on the road, was that ever like isolating, or did you kind of prefer to be around like the adults and the cowboys as
I
opposed to
didn't know any different.
yeah.
Whenever you've done it your whole life, yet I didn't know any other situation. So yeah, I mean, it was good. And I just was mainly around a lot of adults, but it taught me, obviously I don't have trouble talking to strangers. And it taught me, I'd probably learn how to act and behave better more at an earlier age, because you would have to be at nice dinners and stuff and you were a lot of times the only small person there. And so you couldn't misbehave.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any regrets, and I'm grateful for the way I grew up, and I got to see a lot of country and places that I probably would have never seen, and experiences that I couldn't have seen if I would have stayed home and gone to 8 years of public school that I didn't go to.
Hmm.
And it would have been nice if homeschooling was a little more mainstream when I did it, because back when I did it, it was like the weird kid that got learned from a mailbox is what I remember hearing. People tease me like, you're that weird kid that gets their schooling from a mailbox, because they sent the curriculum and it came in the mail. And then I had like a tutor in the trailer and stuff and would help me. And
Hmm.
yeah, that was just, that was the normal, but it was,
Yeah.
when you're a kid, it's not cool. It's not as fun to be different. How about
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so I would have enjoyed to have something a little more normal, but I also enjoyed the way that I grew up. And I probably wouldn't be the person that I am today if I wouldn't have had the years of the childhood that I had. I mean, you can never know the butterfly effect, and how things would be different. You could say, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But if you don't do one thing, then you didn't do these other things and stuff. So I always just kind of, the road that got me here made me the person that I am now.
Plus, I feel like cowboy lessons like are really like courtesy and perseverance and integrity are like things that, you kind of only learn
It is
hanging around with boys,
Yeah, well, and exactly. And that lifestyle, the whole Western lifestyle is very, I'm sure now that you've had a few more years since I first met you to be around more of it. And I'm sure that you've seen that is that it's a very, you know, respectable and handshake agreements and just a lot of that you don't necessarily experience outside of Western culture. And I do appreciate that about it.
Yeah. So after transitioning from homeschooling to regular school, was that a tricky transition? Were there other rodeo
It
kids?
was.
Yeah.
It was, as a matter of fact. It was I wanted to do it and it was my idea, but once the act of doing it and physically showing up and being at a building with 1,100 people that are your age and size that you've never been around, it's a little overwhelming. And you're the new kid and you didn't all those kids all went to the same middle schools, and there were like a handful of kids that hadn't gone to school in middle school together,
Yeah.
And so it was definitely made me second guess my choice. I'll put it that way. many a times my freshman year I second guessed myself for wanting to do that. Why would I put myself through this? Because it wasn't that I was like getting stuffed in lockers or anything like that. It's just very different, and it just adjusting to a whole different lifestyle, and just being around that many people that were my age I had never been around in my life. And so the magnitude of being around, and just kind of, high school is kind of like prison in the sense that they tell you, you go from a bell to this class to that class, and this is when you eat, and this is when you're tired, and this is when you go to the bathroom. And when you haven't had a structure like that, it was a pretty different thing to get used to.
Yeah, it's hard. I feel like although like if high school is like if your high school years are the best years of your life, then like maybe that's not a good.
I agree. I agree. I had this conversation actually. I saw a friend of mine that we went to high school together a couple days ago, and she's got a 16-year-old daughter, and she's kind of getting, I don't know, bullied, but a little bullied, and we were just talking about if you could, it doesn't matter after you graduate, none of this is going to matter, but you got to survive the next 2.5 years. And that's the sucky part, right? Is that as a grown-up, we know that it doesn't matter, but you still do remember what it's like that you have to survive that time. And that's not fun, you got to figure out the best way to, and I'm sad for anybody that doesn't have a good high school experience, because I really did. I had a lot of fun. I made a lot of friends, and but it didn't happen overnight. And it took that first year to really kind of I was pretty quiet, and just taking it all in. And it was a pretty big adjustment. I probably the biggest thing I would say that I noticed is the weakness in my athletic ability, which I'm not saying that I would have been better had I had 8 years of training, but whenever kids start elementary school and everybody starts learning how to play basketball at the same time, or volleyball and all this stuff, and everybody's not a superstar, but you kind of all learn at the same, and everybody would look at my height and they're like, oh, you must be good at this. And I was not. I was not good at basketball. I was not good at volleyball. I was not good at track. I was not good at any sport. None of those. I was very misgiving there. My height did not give me any athletic ability whatsoever. And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I felt like I missed out on, because by the time you're that age, you don't want to be the worst one at all the basketball camps and all the volleyball camps and all that stuff. So you just sort of don't do that thing, even if you wanted to. So
it's like but the dream of like getting picked last at dodgeball.
Right. Like absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, so after high school, you decided to study communications, right? You jumped into communications.
I did. Originally I started school at Tarleton State University in Stephenville, Texas. And I went down there because I wanted to college rodeo. I had never competed in rodeo. Like I had always went with my parents and been at other rodeos, but I'd never been able to compete because that's just not what they did. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to run barrels, and I thought that would be that was kind of the rodeo capital at the time. It's really exploded since then, but at that time it was a little more. And so I went to Tarleton and I had a great time down there. I After a couple of years, I was not doing exceptionally good in my scholastics because I was doing exceptionally well in my social career, right, not as well in my educational career. Is that the best way to politically say that?
Well, if you're studying communications, like your social career is like
right. I was communicating. Speech communications was what they had there. They didn't have an ICOM, and so yeah, I was studying communications, but I was doing it more late hours and at the bar than I was at, so anyway.
No harm in that.
No, I definitely got socialized. So I had a lot of fun there. And then I took a year off, and the plan was to go back to Tarleton after a year, but I ended up not going back. We have a university here in Pueblo, which is about 30 minutes from home. And so it worked out better after I came back from my year off, that I went to school here. And that time, and I will say there was a lot less distractions here, True. So I still had fun, but I bear down, and I wanted to be at that point. Then I wanted to just graduate. I wanted to be done with it, not drag it out over my social life. And so I knocked it out. Anyway, I knocked out 2.5 more years because I had not studied. Since I did so little the first 2 years, I really had to work very hard the next 2.5 just to get it done in 2.5. Yeah, exactly. But it was fun. College was great. And from there, I went to work for a record label. Well, I went to work for a company called Rodeo America. And then I started working with them, and they were working with a record label out of New York City. And then that kind of opened that door. And that all lasted about 6 months. And then I was kind of not sure what I was wanting to do, and my dad was needing some help. And so next thing you know, I'm back here, and now it's 28 years later, and I don't know where I went.
Oh man. So you said record label. How did you kind of fall into that world? Like, did you want to try something else, or?
Well, no, I literally fell into that world. I was working for Rodeo America, and Rodeo America was the licensing company for, at that time, the PRCA, the PBR, the AQHA, which those are all Western lifestyle. I'm sure everybody listening to this would be familiar with those acronyms. And so they did the licensing. So any t-shirts, any hoodies, anything with those logos on it went through them, right? So since we did that, there was a record label. When I first started, I started working with them, and they were wanting to do an official PRCA rodeo album. And so I had started working with them then, just with the process. And by the time I left 6 months later, or when I was leaving, the album was just getting ready to launch. And so when they found out that I was leaving, they asked if I would be their grassroots connection, is what their exact words were. Yeah. And so, it was funny because they hired me just to, like, as an independent contractor, to do on-site events and things like that, in alongside with my rodeoing. Yeah. And I'll never forget, I made the deal. They flew me out to, I don't honestly remember the order. They flew me out to New York, and then I made the deal with them. But I made a deal for $5,000 a month plus my expenses. Man. And I mean to tell you, at that age, like, I never was going to see that. I never going to see another poor day as long as I live. Like, and I can't even tell you how many at that leather jackets with all the logos and everything. That's what was cool then. Yeah. So let me just tell you how many of those I bought on that trip.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then they flew me to Toronto, and I met with these people at Columbia Records, and it was a whirlwind fun time. And I did that for, we did the first album that year. That would have been in 97. And it actually was fairly, they sold 100,000 copies, which isn't unsuccessful for a compilation of re-recordings. I mean, re-releases. There weren't any, new artists. We didn't have any big, they were old artists that we were putting re-releases. But the problem is they had set a budget for like 300,000. So even though our 100,000 still was not successful. So they had the licensing agreement and the contract to do 2 more. And I helped them on the second one a little bit on a smaller scale. And then after that, when they did their third one, it was a much smaller release and everything. So but I had a great time, and it was, I'll never forget when they flew me to Toronto, I was like Julia Roberts jumping up and down on the bed in the hotel. I had a view over the Toronto where the Toronto Blue Jays played in that
Yeah.
hotel. Literally, you open your windows and that was their ball field. And I'm like looking out on that, and they had a big welcoming basket from Columbia Records was on my, with like peanuts and
Yeah.
pizza stuff, and the big fluffy robes. And I'm like jumping up and down on the bed, going, "Wow, this is the greatest thing ever! I'm a big star." I was not, but
That's like a
at the
superstar
time,
lifestyle.
as
Yeah.
a 22-year-old, 20 whatever I was, 22, 23, whatever I was, I felt like it. So
Yeah, that is a superstar lifestyle. Like being able to buy leather jackets at 22.
right, like I know,
That's big.
and those are such a, and I don't even know where those are now because those are so out. But in the 90s, they were cool.
Yeah, they're coming back. You got to find them because I bet they're
I was gonna
yeah.
searching down, right? Are they
Yeah.
coming back now?
A little bit. I've seen them out and about. I think like 90s style overall is like making a comeback. So
I
get
should
your
have kept them.
get your eBay fired up and
Right,
yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Um, so you had that superstar lifestyle, and then what kind of brought you back to the ranch? Your dad needed some help. Did you feel like that was going to be kind of a temporary thing and then you were going to jump back into this new world, or did you feel like, okay, now it's my time to like step in and
It was never a conscious thing that I thought this would be where the next 28 years of my life would be. I will be really honest. Yeah, dad was needing help, and I was kind of not really enjoying where I was at the moment. And so it was just kind of the natural course of action. But did I think that this is where I was going back to stay? No, not really. I didn't really know. When you're 20, in your early 20s, don't really know. You just don't. Or you think but you usually don't, right?
yeah.
Usually your path changes. And I enjoyed what I did, but I wasn't really sure that that's what I wanted to do for that long. And different. I've done some different things over the course of the last few decades that I alongside of rodeo and things like that have given me other opportunities to experience other things, because I do have to kind of keep my mind busy, or else it needs to, new things keep it exciting.
Yeah.
And so but I have no regrets. I've enjoyed, rodeo's been good to me, and I've met so many great people and had so many relationships, but it does go by quickly, like you're always doing it and you're like, well, I'll do this for a while and then we'll see where the road leads. And, the road list just leads to the next year. And that's what it's done. And it's been good. But you wake up and you're like, I guess this is what I'm doing now, because that degree that I got is pretty much worthless. Nobody's really going to be interested in hiring a mass comm major with a 20-something-year-old degree collecting dust in a book somewhere. And so, but it's been good. I mean, I have no regrets. I can definitely say I have no regrets.
Good. Are you someone who like I know people that like cannot sit still. They need to be learning something new or jumping into a new project. Are you that kind of person or do you?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I don't think I am. Like, I think I'm not, that I'm like, oh God, I just want to do nothing today, but I don't do very well with doing nothing. Anytime, and sometimes I do, sometimes you just want to just chill and do nothing and lay on the couch and do Hulu. And that's what I do sometimes. But I don't, as good as that sounds, when you don't have time to do any of that, I can't do it for very long. And I do, if my mind is not doing something, then I find that I don't sleep good. I always seem to eat good. My appetite is always good, but
Yeah.
I don't feel as good. I eat out of unhappiness, or, I just feel better when I'm busier. And strangely enough, when I'm busier, I get way more done than whenever I have more time. Then I'm like, oh, I got time to do that. And I'll do piddly around with this. And the next thing you know, I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't do that. But whenever you're super busy, you're not going to have time. So you just take care of stuff, right? I'm sure you're the same way.
Oh yeah. It's like your brain is already kind of stimulated. And so you're just like, might as well pick up a new hobby or something,
I know. I've got this hour and a half. I wonder if I could learn how to do this.
Yeah. Yep.
How long is this YouTube video?
Yeah. We'll just learn to crochet or something like that.
Right, exactly. I can pick this up. Just take a step up. No, not so
yeah. So you're in your early 20s and your dad kind of suddenly announces that you're taking over as front man, right? Like what was that response from his team? Were you kind of like accepted and welcomed immediately, or was it kind of,
No, not really.
yeah.
No. um, there was a couple that worked for him at the time, and I remember that they stormed out of the dad kind of gathered the crew into the cookhouse and kind of told them, and most people just kind of nodded, and they just stormed out and said that they wouldn't work for me, and then they did, and then yeah, I mean, there were people that didn't say anything, but
Mm,
they weren't just openly thinking, that they thought it was a bad idea. And I don't blame them. I mean, at the time I was 23 years old, maybe 22, 20, I don't even know, somewhere in there.
yeah.
And I mean, it just didn't, and I get it. Like if I was on the other side of the fence, I wouldn't have been receptive that much either, I guess. But I guess that's where you learn to just suck it up, and you got to get thick skinned and just accept. And, probably the biggest thing that I learned is better work alongside them so that you can learn. And that's what I had to do. I had a lot to learn. I mean, and that was the biggest thing is a lot to learn. And there was just different episodes that I can think about over the years where I wasn't necessarily welcomed in that position, but eventually it got a lot easier and I got more welcomed and I got more accepted. And a lot of that is just keeping your mouth shut and keeping your ears open. And I always have a saying that keep your mouth shut and don't let your brain spill out. But I feel like that a lot of times whenever you talk too much, you can let people know how stupid you are. And so I tried to keep my mouth shut as much as possible and try to learn and not let everybody know how dumb I was. And in the process, I maybe got a little smarter.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest learning curve during that time period?
In the beginning, the biggest thing is learning all the horses because,
Mm,
the misgiving is that I was around these bucking horses all the time as a kid. And I mean, even though I might have been around them, I wasn't ever that was never my job. Like I was always, like I told you earlier, carrying a flag in the openings or cleaning tack or taking care of the saddle horses, or those were all the jobs that I was always given. So I never did anything with the bucking horses until after I came back, and was helping in my 20s. That was just that. Until then, that just hadn't been my job. I'd always had other jobs and stuff. So even though I was around, I hadn't learned like the numbers and the names of all the animals. And that's a huge thing. You can't do this job without knowing all the animals and knowing every number and every name, and being able to pick them out of a crowd. And that was a learning curve. I mean, now it's easy because I'm there when they're conceived. I'm there whenever they're born. I'm there with them every, day. So it's easy to learn them. But when you're learning it at that time, you were talking about like 500 head of horses. And, when you're trying to learn all of those at the same time. And yeah, that was probably the biggest learning curve, I would say.
yeah. How'd you tackle that? Did you have like flashcards or?
No, the good thing is back then, whenever you would send the stock into Procom, which is Procom is the central entry system for where the contestants enter at the PRCA and then the stock contractors.
Yeah.
So back then it's neat, now we email and do all of that. But back then you would fax in lists and you would handwrite or type the list. So you wrote the number, you wrote it or you typed it every single time, and you'd write it. I guess we were handwriting still because you couldn't even cut and paste. So the same horse, if he was out twice that week, you'd write him here and you'd write him here. But the good thing about doing that is that writing, it trains your brain. Not only does it teach you those particular horses, but it literally trains your brain to learn numbers and horse names together. And you learn where they just go together like one word.
Yeah.
And I would say that was 100% the number one thing that taught me
Mhm.
was just setting the draw and, making horse lists and what horses were going to what rodeos and writing all the lists for all of that. The fact that we didn't have technology back then and you couldn't just go cut and paste on an Excel sheet or different things like that. The fact that I physically had to write it
Mhm.
was a game changer. It really was,
Yeah.
you really kind of, we've come a long way with technology and it sure speeds things up. But sometimes you do have to old school a little bit just to teach your brain a few things.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely glad that I had like the few years that I did without technology because
Yeah,
I feel like I'm a little better for it. So
right.
Did you feel like this extra sense of pressure to get it right, being the daughter of a legend? Like, did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. No ifs and buts about it. I was the youngest person, I was the girl, and I was the boss's daughter. So absolutely 100%. There was a lot of pressure to make sure you get it right, not
Yeah.
screw up.
How did you deal with that pressure? Like, did you kind of just have to brush it aside, or like, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, I guess it just becomes part of it. Like if you just, I can remember being pretty, stressed out and just not, it wasn't always just like fun, good times. It was a lot of just stress, I guess. And you kind of forget, like now I forget, but yeah, there was times where when you don't know and you screw up and you're just like, I gotta fix this, I gotta fix this before it becomes a thing. And yeah, I mean, it's good, but I mean, now it's good. At the time, it didn't feel awesome, but it's what made I don't think I'd be tough enough to do the things I do now if I wouldn't have had that rocky road of learning to curve in. And it was, it wasn't all bad. Like it was pretty paved in the sense that I grew up in these rodeos. And so people were a lot more accepting to see me there because they'd seen me there my whole life growing up, whether they were contestants or rodeo committee members or whatever they were, rodeo clowns. They had seen me growing up, so it didn't seem weird that I was there. Even if I was in a different role, it didn't seem weird to have me there.
Mm.
So I do think that that makes it easier than if I was just, somebody came in off the street and applied for a job with my dad and it just say, hey, I'd like to come work for you and eventually run your company. That's a tougher
Yeah.
jump than it is to have grown up in that environment. And then it's just a matter of proving yourself that you deserve the job that you have. And
Mm.
everybody has to, I mean, I don't think whether you're, running the drive-through at McDonald's or you're doing whatever you do, everybody's got to prove that they are supposed to be doing the job that they've been selected to do. I mean, you do that every day. Otherwise you lose your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you've proven yourself. You're a pro. Congrats.
Yeah. And I still do stupid mistakes. Like I left the gator out with the bucking horses night before last and they pulled the seat up and chewed all the wires underneath and yanked them
Oh,
all out. And
mm-mm.
I'm like so mad at myself because first of all, I'm mad at them because I'm like, leave it
Yep.
alone. Like, why there's nothing in here.
Yeah.
But I got home late and I'm like, surely it'll be fine the next day. And then now I've got to get a mechanic out here and we got to get this, and all this stuff. So a lot of I create work for me. And a lot of times I'm like, a pro doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes literally daily. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll still make stupid mistakes. And a lot of them I'm like, oh, better. Like I know a better decision, but just
That's
don't always make it.
yeah, that's such a horse that like Buck and Bronx, I think they're so massive that you think that they're these like insanely big scary animals, but they're just
Right.
like big toddlers, you know?
They
Like,
are. They're just like they're like a bunch of thugs.
yeah.
Like I looked at my poor gator after they'd been over there and the seat was gone. It looked like I parked it in Colfax and left it there overnight. I mean, it had like totally been downtown Denver had just taken it over because I mean, the
Oh
seat was
no.
gone, the flag was gone. They had pulled stuff out of the glove compartment, the wires underneath the seat, they'd ripped those out. And
Oh,
I'm just like, this is literally what would have happened if I would have parked this gator in downtown Denver overnight and it would have looked the same way. And a little bunch of rambunctious bucking horses, it doesn't matter if they're great world champion caliber, whatever, bucking
mhm.
horses, they still are all thugs in the end.
They're rebellious teenagers. They're rebelling against their mom for some reason.
Right, I guess. Just get out here quicker and feed us.
So stock contracting is not a glamorous job at all by any means, as you know, you have just demonstrated talking about that. It's a lot of work. Can you kind of walk us through a day on the ranch when you're not on the road?
Sure. Yeah. I usually leave my house about 7:30. In the summertime, we start earlier, but the wintertime hours, we usually don't start feeding until about 8. Or I say we, right now, it's been me for quite a while by myself, but that's about to change. I got a guy hired that's going to come help me. But
Nice.
yeah, I usually leave my house about 7:30 because I got to go down the hill and feed the cats and do a couple check on my mom and a few things. And then I start putting the saddle horses in and then I start feeding and we got a pretty easy system now. Like I have the feed truck's got a trip feeder on there, which if people aren't familiar with that, it's you have a switch inside the truck and you just flip it and it shoots the feed out into the troughs. And we Lahana Mill makes me a cube specifically with a recipe that they came up for me for my horses. And so that makes it pretty easy to grain. And then I feed, right now I'm feeding three, I don't want to say this wrong, 1,300-pound bales of hay a day. I flake them off there, off the truck. And so that's the same type of deal. Is I go out and I feed the colts in the back, and then I feed them their hay. And we have a rake, and I just like pull it off the truck and flake it off that they get. And then I come to the next pasture, which is where all the thugs live.
Yeah.
And where I grain them, I close the gate, and then I put the hay out for them, and then I let them out, and then I go out and feed some bulls that I have, and then I hay those saddle horses less. And as long as nothing bad happens, it's done in 2 hours. The other day I came out and one of the bulls was out in the saddle horse pasture, and I still don't know how. I'm guessing he just jumped out. So they can jump out if they want to. They usually don't.
Yeah.
Because they're not anything really, but there's not any, they certainly physically can. My fences are not that tall in the pasture that they're in. So, but he was ready to get back into his pasture when I got out there. He just, we're at the gate, like, let's get this open, But, whenever you see something out, then you're like, all right, how to get out? So then you got to drive the fence line and make sure there's not fenced down somewhere. So those are the things that take a little longer than the 2 hours. But, and then, last week I had put weanling colts out with the saddle horses to start getting them used to that. Well, they just took out like 2 hours worth of fence with all their, mingling around and stuff like that. So those are the little things that you don't know until you wake up that morning, what's going to become of it. The wind has been pretty dreadful here the last few weeks. And so that creates hardships. It's blown my bullshit twice. It took the 10 off the first time, and we got that put back on. And then we did such a good job screwing it down that the next time it just took the whole building with it and split all the rafters and beams and picked them up and stuck them in there. So that one's not going together quite as quickly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a vase, like when you buy the vase, it's really pretty on the shelf.
Yeah.
And then it breaks, and then you get the glue out and you're trying to put the vase back together. It doesn't quite fit and ever look like it did. No, that's kind of where we're at with this bullshit. If I didn't think I'd catch the whole prairie and my house on fire, I'd probably take a match to it. I'm pretty disgusted with it at the moment.
Get rid of it.
Start over. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, way to make a girl feel unproductive. I get mad at myself if I have to wake up at like 10. So
yeah, but you probably work all hours writing and everything like that.
So. For sure. Yeah. Different kind of work. So what aspect of running the company would you say that you're proudest of? Like through all the hardships, is there something on the day-to-day that you're like, this is great. I'm really proud that I created this.
Oh, the bucking horses. I mean, really, when I look at what I can't really say there's much to show for the last 28 years of my life, except for that herd of horses out there. They might be thugs, but that's what I've created, with my, with Dad's bloodlines that he started. And then we've tweaked it a little bit and just putting together, with other people's bloodlines that have been kind enough to send us studs and stuff like that. We've, that's what I have to show for what I've done for, my career in rodeo, I guess. So I would say that's definitely the high point of stock contracting, is being able to have raised animals that are competitive enough to be selected for the national finals rodeo, for cowboys to win rodeos on them, for cowboys to hear they talk about them, they ask about them, they know them, they become famous in that circle. Those are all, it's kind of cool to think that you were the person that put that all together. And that's, when I look back at what all I did in rodeo, that's going to be what I think about.
Yeah. And it is, I feel like people who maybe don't know a lot about rodeo kind of just assume that like you grab a green horse and throw him in the buck and shoot and put a cowboy on him and that's what happens. But like these horses are athletes in the same way that these rodeo people are athletes, like they are, you're taking care of athletes. And I think that that's huge.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. It's kind of being like a coach. I heard this coach do a soundbite on Good Morning America. I think it was the girls' college ball team that just won something. And he said, I'm not their whole world, but they're mine. And I think that a lot with these bucking horses. I'm like, I'm not their whole world. Their whole world is like, they like to eat, they like to do this, they don't really care. The only thing connection they have to me is that to make sure I get that feed truck out there when they want it, and make sure they have everything they need. But other than that, they don't really have any connection to me, but they are my home world, So
Yeah.
I guess I kind of feel like that basketball coach in that way.
Yeah. I bet it's more than that. I bet they love you.
Yeah.
They just don't show it.
They they're all like, they show it if I bring them food. I
Yeah,
could
there
go
you
out there
go.
with if I go out there with horse cookies, all of a sudden, oh, Kirsten, my best friend.
They show you by messing up your gator. They're like, "Show love."
Exactly. If I had to cost them about $500 in parts, probably. Yeah, that's how they show their love.
Yeah. Um, so the first time that we met and talked was at the Cowgirl Museum's
Mhm.
Spring Cowgirl Roundup because you are a member of the Cowgirl Hall of Fame. No big deal, just whatever. And you ended up you were giving a demonstration on a horse and talking about all of that to the attendees, and you ended up getting very emotional at a moment when you were talking about your horses and especially Painted Valley. And it really showed how much you truly love these horses. They're not just stock, they're like, you have a connection to them. And Painted Valley, I know is one of the most famous horses in your head. Could you talk a little bit about that horse and kind of your journey with that horse?
Sure, sure. Yeah, he was a colt that originally came from my dad. We had two colts that were late. When I say late, they were just born later than the rest of the colts.
Yeah.
So they were weaned from their moms later than the rest of the colts. And so they were kind of, I told him, Dad, you should let me have those two colts. One was a stud colt, and one was a filly colt. And I said, you should let me have those two colts. And he's like, all right. But he said, yeah, I'd take them. But mainly they were going to just be in the way. Like the other colts were on another pasture. They were just, so
Yeah.
I took him into town. At the time I was living in town, and I had my barrel horse that with my illustrious barrel career that never took off. And so I had him boarding at an arena in Pueblo West. And so I just took them and hauled them there. And so those, the first couple of years of their lives, that's where they lived, in a
Mm.
pen next to my barrel horse at a boarding arena, basically, and then I guess maybe that was the first year. And then I built a barn. I had an acre behind my house out there. And so I ended up putting a fence in and a barn and everything right there. And then they got moved there and they lived there for another year. And then, like I think about that's kind of, so they were, Painted Valley was one of those two, obviously. And then as he got older, generally, if you're going to leave a horse, if you're going to cut him cut him as a geld, make them as a stud, a gelding. Geez, I can't talk. You're gonna take a stud and make him a gelding. Usually do it when they're yearlings, they're 2 years old, and so past that point, and I wanted to leave him a stud, and so, but their testicles usually drop, and his just never did. He was a very late bloomer, I guess you would call. He was like 3 years old, and that's pretty late. And so my brother and my dad kept telling me, they're like, you've got to cut that stud. That he's never gonna, he's gonna act like a stud, but he's not gonna be able to breed, and you need to. And I would never let him, And if you'd have been there, I promise you would have gotten cut, but I never would let him. And so, anyway, long story shorter, that whole thing, he ended up pretty much turning our rodeo company, bringing it back to life, because we kind of made some bad. We bred to a stud that had been a very good stud, in competition. He went to the National Falls Rodeo and stuff, but he just was not, his offspring just was not a pretty good producer. And the problem with when you're breeding bucking horses is it takes so long before you buck them. They're 5 or 6 years old. You have, 15 to 20 crops out of that stud every year. And it's 6 years later, you got 100 colts on the ground before you really realize that maybe they're not that good. So we had kind of got ourselves into that situation. And so, when Painted Valley came along and his colt started bucking, it really kind of turned our program around. And so, he was very gentle because I'd had him in my yard and kept him with me pretty much most all my life. And so he was very well behaved, and he was also the first horse when we went to artificial insemination. They were at Timber Creek Vet Clinic, Dr. Greg Vandeclaus, and now he's done all kinds of things with bucking horses. But at the time, there really hadn't been anybody do anything with him. And so I wanted to get him collected so that I could sell his semen, because when his colts were really bucking and people were wanting to breed to him and stuff. And so I had contacted Clint Johnson, which is a bronc rider who was good friends with Dr. Greg, I knew. And he called Dr. Greg. And so I went and took him down there, and he was the first bucking horse stud that ever got collected at the clinic. And so that was kind of another turning point, because he kind of opened the door to that. I think about how many studs now that they've collected there, and they're doing all the everything that's been good cloning of the bucking horses. Like they cloned Bobby Joe. That was a horse that Dad had raised, and then we took him down there, and Dr. Greg took a patch of skin off him while he was alive, and then just cut a little patch under his neck, and then later he cloned and made a bucking horse stud that all the rodeo companies have almost all of them have bred to him through Dr. Greg. So, I mean, I just like all of those of kind of steps that open doors. And Payne Valley, I guess he was the one that kicked the door down, really. He just, because he was so gentle, we were able to take him down there, because Dr. Greg didn't really have facilities that he does now. He had this like pipe little deal that we ran him in, and he wasn't halter broke, but he was gentler than most bucking horses, and you could kind of herd him places with a bucket of grain or treats or something. And so, he was a great horse. And, 75% of the animals that I have out there now are related to him, and some either they're his kids or his grandkids now. And so that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. And you trusted your gut, and that's how that happened.
Yeah, sometimes, occasionally you make the right decision. It doesn't always work that way, but that one turned out really good.
Have you always been capable of trusting your gut on those things, or did that kind of come through practice?
I still trust my gut. It just isn't always right. I always say sometimes you just got to make quick decisions, and you have to make them with the information that you have at that time. And it isn't always the right one, but you do the best that you can do with the information that you have in the amount of time that you have to make that decision. And then you have to just go with it. And if it's the wrong one, it's the wrong one. But sometimes you don't have enough time or information to make the right one, or you don't make the right one. But occasionally it works out, and it's pretty cool when it does. There's a lot of times I make decisions and they just don't work out. I'm not gonna lie, the percentage is probably higher that they don't work out. And I'm like, oh man, that was a wrong call. But then whenever you do make a decision, it still excites me. I'll decide to put a horse that's always been a bronc, and I'll be like bucking in the barebacks or vice versa, and all of a sudden he's rejuvenates his career in another event, and I'm like, oh wow, that was the right decision to make. So, or you change something up. We figured out to open the halter bigger on some of these horses, and that was something that I heard from a friend of mine. Brett Franks came up with that if you widen the noseband on these bronc halters, that a lot of these horses that are lightheaded, it won't bother them so much. And we figured that out on a couple of horses this last year, and it made all the difference on a horse that was just ordinary to being a superstar. So those are the choices and decisions that when you make them and they work out, that it's really cool. But it just doesn't always go that way. But that's everybody. That's in everything.
Yeah, you got to have those poor decisions so that the success is
Right.
Yeah. So you've been on the rodeo circuit for years now, and I'm looking to you for advice on the rodeos that I need to be going to. So what's the difference between a good rodeo and a great rodeo? Like, what are the factors that you think
if it's about an hour and a half? If it's long and drawn out, it's not necessarily the best rodeo.
Okay.
There's so many great rodeos out there. I would say rodeos for somebody to hit, that want to hit monumental rodeos. Salinas, California is a great one out on the West Coast. The American is going to be coming up here. I think it's maybe next weekend or 2 weekends. And that's a great rodeo to see, because they're different. They all have something different. Calgary Stampede up in Canada, Rodeo Houston down in Texas, Cheyenne Frontier Days in Wyoming. You've got there's so many different rodeos that have something to add because of, this or that. I think that you can experience and get something good out of just about any rodeo you go to. And then you'll become more of a fan. Obviously I didn't mention the biggest one of all, the National Finals Rodeo. And that's the one that is a great, I don't recommend that be your first rodeo though. I've had people tell me that's the first rodeo they go to. And then they're like, yeah, these other ones weren't that good. Well, that's like going to the Super Bowl for the very first football game you ever go to. And then you go to your kid's high school game. You're like, really, it wasn't as good as that first one I went to.
People warm up to NFR. Yeah.
Right. So, I would recommend. Fort Worth is a great rodeo. Are you still living down there?
I live in Virginia now, but I grew up going to the Fort Worth Rodeo. That was my big,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great rodeo, Dickey's Arena. Now that it's moved there, it's really exploded. So, I mean, I'm going to leave some out. There's great rodeos all over the country. We do Prescott Frontier Days in Prescott, Arizona. It's the world's oldest rodeo, and and that whole town just like supports that rodeo so amazingly. And it's so, it's so great to be a part of it, and I enjoy that so much. And so every rodeo I feel has such a great thing. That's what's great about rodeo is that it brings a community together. It offers something different wherever you go. Like every rodeo, I think, has something that it can offer differently to our sport that it brings to the table, whether it's the community or whether it's an extremely tough competition, or you're watching rodeo in the downtown area, or in a place that in a ball field. We put rodeos on in ball fields and
Mhm.
football stadiums. And I mean, I think the fact that every venue has something to give. And I think that's a great thing, that it's such a flexible, encompassing sport that, basketball can really only be in a basketball. You
Right.
don't play basketball very many times on grass and stuff like that. You go to Pendleton, they buck on grass, and the Cowboys, Bulldoggers throw steers on grass. They don't do that any other time of the year. And so those are the things that every venue, I think, has something to give.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that like the small town rodeos also have that charm, like you were mentioning Prescott, like,
Mm-hmm.
where the entire town kind of rallies around the rodeo is like such a beautiful
It
experience.
is, isn't it? It's cool to see a community just so enthralled with an event, whatever the event is.
Yeah. So obviously rodeo is booming and growing and it's becoming a lot more mainstream. Are you enjoying the growth or do you kind of miss when rodeo was a little more of like this tight-knit thing?
No, I mean, everything's got to get better. Things got to progress. And to progress, you got to change. And, yeah, there's some things that I miss about specific situations, but I can't say that I'm nostalgic for anything that isn't progress. I think it's got to progress. It's got to get better, because if it didn't, it would get outdated, and pretty soon rodeo would go away, and that would be terrible. I think that would be a terrible thing to lose to our Western culture if rodeo went away. So it's got to progress. It's got to get bigger. It's got to grow, and with that, more money, more television, more contestants, more growth, more everything. Yeah, you're gonna unfortunately sacrifice a few things along the way, and that's bad. But otherwise, you could sacrifice the entire sport as a whole, and I would hate to see that happen. So yeah, progress is good.
Yeah. And speaking of progress, as like rodeo athletes, I think are just getting better and better and better, specifically bull riders and bronc riders. So do you feel the pressure to like produce animals that are kind of constantly living up to this growing standard?
Oh, absolutely. Because you're right. The contestants, the athletes are 100% getting better. I think and I say that because I think of some of the great cowboys from the past, and it wasn't that these athletes are any better than them. I just think that, that things are so focused on health and fitness and, all of the things that, in the West, these guys didn't necessarily eat in the past. They didn't eat that great. They perhaps maybe drink sometimes a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think the kids that today are a lot more focused on health and trying to make the longevity of their career if possible. But like you say, to counteract that, you have to have animals to stay competitive. And I don't think it's really the level of the competitors that are making us strive to do better as much as it's the level of the competition in our field. I mean, athletes 10 years ago were very good and probably just as good as the ones now. It's just that there was less bucking horses that were as good 10 years ago. And 20 years ago, there was even less. And so when you look at the way that spectrum's going, the overall, the genetics and people's breedings programs and everything, the bucking horses as a whole are just getting so much better, that since that's the case, you have to, it's like any business, if you want to stay competitive and stay relevant, you have to continue to get better as well, or you'll get left behind.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that's a that's a pressure cooker for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Everyone kind of talks to you about your dad's legacy, which rightfully so, because he has a beautiful legacy. But what do you think you would love your legacy to be?
I think that really the only thing, I go and if you can leave something better than you found it, then I think that would be my legacy. So if when I'm done with rodeo, if I've been able to impact it in any positive ways and make it any better than it was when I got there, then I would say that would be what I want my legacy to be. And those bucking horses, like I said, those bucking horses that are out in that pasture, that's going to be the legacy that carries on after I'm not involved in rodeo anymore, because it'll be what they do and then what their offspring accomplish and what their offspring accomplish. And so that'll continue on. And so hopefully the things that I have participated in to help make rodeo better will continue to get better. And I can say, people can say, well, maybe the things that I participated in will continue to grow. And, I think that's what anybody wants is just if you can leave a place better if you can leave a place better than you found it, whether it's an apartment or a sport, then that's a good legacy to leave.
Yeah. And if you weren't doing rodeo, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
I don't know. There's a lot of things that interest me. I like I've been doing for a good friend of mine. I've been doing a mass closet organizationing for her. She has a basement that I can't even explain, and we've been working on it for several weeks and it's really come along, and organizing is kind of my jam. That is my go. Can't even explain why that gives me so much, but that gives me an adrenaline. And that's something that maybe is something I can control in a world that I can't control much. I can't control the weather. I can't control if horses buck or not. I can't control gas prices. I can't control a lot of things, but when you organize things, it gives me some control. So that's maybe why I like it. But I'm kind of an organizing fiend. And so she's kind of turned her whole basement over to me, and I've been helping her do that this winter. And that's what I'm going to do after we're done here today. And I really enjoy that. So I guess in some weird way, maybe I'd be on one of those little weird shows that, where they go house door to door organizing people's homes or something like that. Maybe that's what I would be doing. I don't know.
I can see it already, like Kirsten Vold, like I
Knick-knack extraordinaire. She'll
yeah,
come in and clean out your basement and get rid of all your memories and replace it with big plastic bins that pull out.
I think that's what we're missing in Western media is like someone who just
So,
organizes stuff. So
right,
that's
I think so. That's my niche.
yeah, that's your thing. We'll call the Cowboy Channel and have them like
Okay.
create a
See if I can give me a 30-minute special to go house door to door, right?
easy peasy. Yeah.
There you go.
Um, so from this conversation, I've deduced that you are busy like 99.99% of the time. But what do you do to unwind and kind of give yourself a break after a hard day?
Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime. I am like, everybody's like, what are you, and do you read? And I'm like, no, I haven't read this for so long. I don't even know where I'd start. I like, I just chill. I guess if I'm not doing something to, if I'm just vegging out, then that's what I like to do. I like to be, you entertain me. I don't want to have to pick up a book, flip the pages, try to follow along. That
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of work. I
Yeah.
like to lay on the couch and watch. I solve a lot of crime. I might have been an FBI agent if I wouldn't have been in rodeo, because I do feel like they missed the boat not having me on their team. I
Oh,
commonly solve the crime right alongside them. So I do like a lot of crime shows and mysteries and stuff like that. But yeah, that's probably my chill thing. I don't really go on long walks on the beach because it would be a heck of a long ways to get to a beach around where I live.
a little landlocked. Yeah.
A little landlocked, not a lot of beaches around here. I don't, but
Yeah.
yeah, and I enjoy time with my friends. Like I'm grateful I have good groups of friends here within 30 minutes, and we try to, we're doing dinner tonight or something like that. So I try to make time as much as possible to just take out and go do fun things with them, because if you don't, everybody gets so busy. If you don't force yourself to carve out that time, it's very easily just to keep working. And I'm sure you can find that too, that you're like, oh, if I don't leave my apartment, then I can just finish getting this story done, or I can get this done and then but sometimes you just got to set it down and it's not going anywhere. And sometimes I'll look around the ranch and there's always things I can do here, but nothing's going to break or die. So I'm just going to leave and go do something else right now.
You just gotta, yeah. Do you have a crime drama that you're like really set on right?
Really hooked on. I was going to say, I don't right now. I mean, been a lot of good ones. I can't even think of one that, my mind's escaping that's new and current. A lot of the old ones that I always liked was like Without a Trace, and all those were always good ones. Cold Case was like my all-time favorite, probably. That was probably my favorite crime show. But there's not a lot of great TV, period, new shows. Like there's good TV, but just network crime shows that used to be like all the time good ones. There's not very many. I watched Paradise on Hulu. I don't know if you watched that. That was like an 8 series deal. Yeah. And that was that was current, and that was pretty good. And I watched that. That was probably the last current crime show thing that I've watched. That most all of them are like either older ones or movies, or something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to find good. I feel like it's at a certain point, it's like it's been done, so you don't want.
Right. It's been really good. I'm one of those that would rather watch a show that I know is good over again. I'll watch the series all over again before I start. Like I'll go perusing through, and I'm just like, none of these are good. Like they'll lose me. I'll start them in 5 minutes, and I'm like, if you haven't caught my attention yet, I'm going to the next one. And so you'll see, like when you have your watch history, you'll see where you you'll see where you have like 5 minutes of 8 different shows, and I never get past that 8 show. And so I have a lot of those on my search history that never got past that. I'm like, this is boring. I can't. This is Tyler Perry had one that was pretty good that was on Prime that I watched. Okay. I don't know. I don't even remember what it was, but it was pretty good last week. It was just a 1-hour movie or 2-hour movie, but as a whole, I can't think of anything that's been that great lately that I'm like, this has really had me. I'm better to go back to the old ones. Yeah. I already have solved the crime before.
It makes you feel smarter because you're like, well, I know.
I'm like, all right. Oh yeah, I saw that right away that guy was going to be this guy's
killer. A serial killer. It's crazy that y'all. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been amazing talking to you again and learning a little more about your life. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'm wishing you the best this rodeo season. Hopefully Hopefully they don't rip up your gator anymore. Hopefully you don't have.
I know. I really do. That would help my life a lot. It's terrorizing my things around here.
I'll be sending you good healing thoughts.
I appreciate that very much. It was a pleasure getting to see you again too, and visiting with you. I hope I get to see you again. Well, thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of Women of the West. I've been your host, Caroline Cabe, with Cowboys and Indians magazine. If you want to read or listen to more Western stories, feel free to check us out at cowboysindians.com, and come say hi to us on our social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever social media platform floats your boat. We'd love to hear what you think about this podcast and get some recommendations on which influential Western women we should chat with next. Until next time, keep your head up and have a wonderful day. Bye now.